Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Molly's small apartment, casting long shadows across boxes still unpacked from her recent move. She sat at her workbench, delicately pinning the iridescent wings of a blue morpho butterfly onto a display board. Each wing caught the light like stained glass windows in a cathedral, reminding her that even in death, there could be breathtaking beauty. This was her sanctuary now, her work as an insect specimen artist. Where others might see creatures of revulsion or fear, Molly saw intricate masterpieces of divine creation. Each delicate antenna, each gossamer wing, each perfectly segmented body spoke to her of the infinite attention the universe pays to even the smallest of its children. Howard never understood, she whispered to the butterfly, her fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted its position. Her ex-husband had called her work morbid and unnatural. But then again, Howard had called many things about her unnatural over the years: her love of solitude, her preference for books over parties, and most damaging of all, the way her eyes would linger a fraction too long on certain women who passed them on the street. The divorce papers lay crumpled in the wastebasket, marked with the coffee stains of many sleepless nights. Freedom, she had discovered, tasted both sweet and bitter on the tongue. As the weeks passed, Molly found herself emerging from the cocoon of her grief. She began venturing out more, carrying her portfolio to local galleries and art fairs. It was at one such fair, beneath a canopy of maple trees just beginning their autumn transformation, that fate decided to intervene. The art fair sprawled across the town square like a colorful patchwork quilt. Artists had set up their booths beneath white tents, their creations dancing in the gentle breeze. Molly's display of preserved insects and botanical specimens drew curious onlookers, though she noticed how some would approach with fascination, while others would recoil in instinctive fear. She was adjusting the lighting on a particularly stunning display of monarch butterflies, when a voice behind her spoke with the warmth of honey poured over fresh bread. "The way you've captured their migration pattern, it's like watching poetry in motion." Molly turned to find herself gazing into eyes the color of rich earth after rainfall. The woman before her was perhaps a few years younger, with auburn hair that caught the sunlight and freckles scattered across her cheeks like constellations. She wore paint-stained jeans and a flowing tunic that suggested an artist's soul, unbound by conventional expectations. "I'm Chloe," the woman said, extending her hand. "Chloe Jones. I'm a nature illustrator." Her touch was warm, lingering a moment longer than mere politeness required. "Your work, it's extraordinary. You see them not as specimens, but as individuals, don't you? Each one has its own story." Molly felt something flutter in her chest, delicate as butterfly wings. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, exactly. Most people think I'm preserving death, but I see it as celebrating life that was." They talked for hours beneath that autumn sky, their conversation flowing like a river that had finally found its proper channel. Chloe spoke of her illustrations with passion, describing how she would sit for hours in meadows and forests, watching the secret lives of creatures most humans never noticed. She painted birds in their natural habitats, captured the tender unfurling of fern fronds, sketched the intricate relationships between predator and prey. "Would you ... Molly hesitated, feeling like a teenager asking for her first date. "Would you like to have dinner? I know a quiet place where we could continue talking." Chloe's smile was radiant as dawn breaking over the horizon. "I thought you'd never ask." The restaurant Molly chose was a small, intimate place tucked away from the main streets, where candles flickered on wooden tables and the walls were adorned with local artwork. They sat in a corner booth, the outside world seeming to fade away, as they discovered the thousand small ways their souls aligned. "I was married," Molly found herself confessing over wine that tasted of summer evenings and distant promises. "For 15 years. I thought I knew who I was, what I wanted." Chloe's fingers found hers across the table, the touch electric and grounding all at once. "And now I feel like I'm meeting myself for the first time." Molly's voice was barely above a whisper. "Is that terrifying or wonderful? I can't decide." "Perhaps," Chloe said gently, "it's both. The most important transformations usually are." That night, as Chloe walked her to her car, they stood beneath a streetlight that cast them both in its golden glow. The air between them hummed with possibility, with the recognition that something precious and fragile was being born. "Molly," Chloe said, her voice soft as the flutter of moth wings. I want you to know there's no rush. No expectations. Whatever this is, whatever it becomes, we have all the time in the world. When Chloe leaned in and pressed her lips gently to Molly's cheek, the simple gesture felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering in the wilderness. In the weeks that followed, Molly and Chloe began to weave their lives together like threads in a tapestry. They would meet in coffee shops where Chloe would sketch while Molly worked on her specimens, their feet touching beneath small tables. They took long walks through botanical gardens, Chloe pointing out the Latin names of plants, while Molly shared the secret lives of the insects that called them home. You see how this orchid has evolved specifically for this type of bee? Chloe would say, her enthusiasm infectious. They're partners in the most beautiful dance of survival and reproduction. And look, Molly would add, pointing to a tiny creature most would overlook, how this aphid has adapted to live in perfect harmony with the ant colony. Nature teaches us that love takes many forms. Their first kiss happened on a Thursday evening, in Molly's apartment, surrounded by the gentle hum of her work lamps and the whispered presence of her preserved collections. They had been looking at one of Chloe's illustrations, a watercolor of a hummingbird, frozen in mid-flight when their eyes met and the space between them dissolved like morning mist. Is this what freedom feels like? Molly whispered against Chloe's lips. This, Chloe replied, is what truth feels like. They moved slowly, carefully, like gardeners tending to their first tender shoots. Molly marveled at the softness of Chloe's skin, the way her body curved and yielded in places Howard's never had. Here was a landscape she had dreamed of but never dared to explore. Here was home, but as any wise gardener knows, not all seasons bring gentle rain and warm sunshine. It was at another art fair, this one in a neighboring town, that Molly first encountered the twins who would test the fragile garden she and Chloe were cultivating. Hannah and Haley Morrison were identical in ways that went beyond mere genetics. Both had platinum blonde hair that fell in perfect waves, both wore designer clothes that hugged their figures like second skin, and both possessed smiles that were as sharp as they were beautiful. They approached Molly's booth like predators, who had spotted prey grazing peacefully in an open meadow. "Oh my God, Hannah, or was it Haley?" exclaimed, her voice pitched to Carrie. "These are absolutely fascinating. Are they real?" "Very real," Molly replied cautiously, something in their synchronized movements setting off alarm bells in her subconscious. "I'm Hannah," the first twin said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "And this is my sister Haley. We're interior designers, and we're working on this amazing project, a nature-themed restaurant. Your work would be perfect." They crowded close to her booth, their perfume cloying in the autumn air. Haley leaned in close enough that Molly could feel her breath on her ear. "You have such beautiful hands," she whispered. "Such delicate fingers. I bet you're incredible at tea." "Detailed work?" Molly stepped back, uncomfortable with the proximity and the suggestive tone. "I thank you. I should mention I have a partner. Chloe, she's, oh, how modern." Hannah interrupted with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Don't worry, honey, we're very open-minded." The twins exchanged a look that Molly couldn't interpret, but felt in her bones like the barometric pressure drop before a storm. They purchased a small pizza display of local beetles arranged in a geometric pattern and left their business card with numbers written in duplicate. "Call us," Haley said, her fingers lingering on Molly's wrist. "Both numbers. You never know when you might need ... options." Over the following days, the twins seemed to appear everywhere Molly went. At the grocery store, in the coffee shop where she and Chloe liked to work, even at the library where Molly researched new specimens. Each encounter felt carefully orchestrated, designed to look like coincidence while feeling anything but random. "Oh, Molly," Hannah would call out, as if surprised to see her. "What are the odds?" They would engage her in conversation, asking personal questions wrapped in seemingly innocent curiosity. How long had she been divorced? Was she enjoying her new lifestyle? Did she ever miss the stability of traditional relationships? "It must be so exciting," Haley said one afternoon, having cornered Molly at a botanical supply store, exploring your sexuality at this stage of life. "Though I imagine it can be confusing too. All those new feelings, new desires. How do you know what's real and what's just ... experimentation?" The questions burrowed under Molly's skin like parasites, feeding on the insecurities she had been working so hard to overcome. That evening, she found herself distant with Chloe, second-guessing every touch, every word of affection. "You seem troubled, love," Chloe said as they sat on Molly's small balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. "What's weighing on your heart, do you think?" Molly began, then stopped, hating herself for the words that wanted to spill out. "Do you think I'm just experimenting? Using you to figure out who I am?" Chloe set down her tea and turned to face Molly fully, her expression gentle but serious. "Is that what you think you're doing?" "I don't know," Molly whispered, the admission tasting of ash in her mouth. "I've never felt this way about anyone, but what if that's just because it's new? What if I'm just running from my marriage instead of running towards something real?" "Molly," Chloe said, taking her hands, "the fact that you're asking these questions tells me you're not experimenting. Someone who is just playing wouldn't care enough to worry about my feelings. But if you need time to figure things out—" "No," Molly said quickly, then caught herself. Was she protesting too much? The twins' poison was working its way through her system, and she could feel herself beginning to doubt everything she had come to believe about herself and her newfound happiness. The twins' campaign intensified. They began calling Molly directly, always with some pretext questions about commissioning more work, invitations to gallery openings, offers to introduce her to potential clients. But their conversations inevitably turned personal, probing. "You know," Hannah said during one such call, "Haley and I were talking, and we both think you're incredibly brave. Leaving your marriage, exploring your attraction to women. It takes real courage to be authentic." Though, Haley's voice joined the conversation, apparently on speakerphone. "We can't help but wonder if you're limiting yourself. I mean, Chloe. Seems sweet, but isn't there a whole world of experiences you haven't tried yet? Other women, other types of relationships." "I love Chloe," Molly said firmly, though the words felt less solid than they had just weeks before. "Of course you do," Hannah replied smoothly. "But love takes many forms, doesn't it? There's comfortable love, passionate love, experimental love. How do you know which type you're experiencing if you don't have anything to compare it to?" The seed of doubt, once planted, began to grow in the dark corners of Molly's mind. She found herself studying Chloe's face during their quiet moments together, wondering if what she felt was genuine attraction or merely the comfort of acceptance. When Chloe touched her, was the flutter in her stomach desire or just gratitude for being wanted? It was during one of their regular visits to the botanical garden that disaster struck. Molly and Chloe were sitting on a bench near the rose garden, watching a family of ducks paddle across a small pond when Hannah appeared as if from nowhere. "Molly," she called out, approaching with that predatory smile firmly in place. "What a beautiful day for a walk in the garden." Chloe stiffened beside her, sensing the intrusion for what it was. Hannah, however, seemed oblivious to the tension. Or perhaps she was feeding on it. "You must be Chloe," Hannah said, extending her hand with calculated grace. "I've heard so much about you. I'm Hannah Morrison, Molly, and I have been working together on some design projects." The lie slipped from her tongue as smoothly as honey from a spoon, and Molly found herself frozen, unable to correct it without revealing the uncomfortable frequency of their encounters. "Actually," Hannah continued, settling herself on the bench, beside Molly without invitation, "I was hoping to steal Molly away for a quick coffee. There's something urgent I need to discuss about the restaurant project." "I should get back to work anyway," Chloe said quietly, her artist's intuition clearly picking up on the undercurrents flowing beneath the surface of this seemingly innocent interaction. As Chloe walked away, Molly watched her go with a mixture of relief and regret, unaware that she had just taken the first step into a carefully constructed trap. Hannah led Molly to a small cafe tucked away from the main paths of the garden. They sat at a table beneath a pergola covered in climbing roses, the air heavy with perfume and the promise of secrets. "You looked uncomfortable back there," Hannah observed, stirring sugar into her coffee with deliberate slowness. "Relationship troubles?" "No," Molly said too quickly. "Chloe and I are fine. Are you?" Hannah leaned forward, her eyes bright with false concern. "Because from where I was sitting, it looked like you were relieved to get away from her for a while." "That's not ... double quotes," Molly began, then stopped. Hadn't she felt a momentary sense of liberation when Chloe walked away? Wasn't there a part of her that craved the excitement of this dangerous game Hannah was playing? "Look," Hannah said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "can I share something with you, woman to woman?" Molly nodded, though every instinct screamed at her to leave. I think you're at a crossroads, Hannah continued. You're trying to figure out who you really are, what you really want. And she's safe, isn't she? She's your soft landing after a difficult divorce, but is safe what you really want? Or do you want to feel alive? As if summoned by some prearranged signal, Haley appeared at their table, sliding into the seat beside her sister with liquid grace. Sorry I'm late, she said, though Molly didn't remember her being invited. I was just thinking about our conversation yesterday, Molly, about passion versus comfort. What conversation? Molly asked, confused. When we ran into each other? At the market, Haley replied smoothly. You were saying how you sometimes wonder if you're settling for the first woman who showed you attention. Molly's mouth opened in protest. She had never said any such thing. But before she could correct the lie, Haley was continuing. It's completely understandable, she said, reaching across to touch Molly's hand. After being married to a man for so long, any woman would feel like a revelation. But how do you know if it's real attraction or just belief? The twins' questions echoed the doubts that had been growing in Molly's mind, weeds in an untended garden. They spoke with such authority, such certainty, that she began to wonder if they could see something she was blind to. You deserve to explore, Hannah said, her fingers now joining her sister's in a gentle caress of Molly's wrist. You deserve to know what real passion feels like. What are you suggesting? Molly asked a part of her already knew. The twins exchanged one of their loaded glances. We're suggesting, Haley said softly, that you let yourself feel something dangerous for once in your life. And before Molly could process what was happening, before she could remember all the reasons this was wrong, Haley leaned across the small table and pressed her lips to Molly's. The kiss was brief, soft, and utterly devastating. Not because it awakened some great passion in Molly's heart, but because it awakened something much worse, guilt, confusion, and the terrible realization that she had just betrayed the one person who had shown her what love could really be. Molly pulled back from the kiss as if she had been burned, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for escape. The twins sat back with satisfied smiles, as if they had just solved a complicated puzzle. See? Hannah said softly. That wasn't so terrible, was it? But it was terrible. Not because the kiss had been unpleasant, but because it had been empty, a perfectly executed technique with no soul behind it. In that moment of contact, Molly understood with crystalline clarity the difference between manipulation and affection, between performance and truth. I have to go, she said, standing so abruptly that she knocked over her coffee cup. The dark liquid spread across the white tablecloth like a stain on her conscience. Molly, wait, Haley called after her, but she was already moving, her feet carrying her away from the cafe and toward the parking lot as quickly as dignity would allow. She drove home in a haze of self-recrimination, her mind replaying the kiss over and over, searching for some way to undo what had been done. By the time she reached her apartment, the full weight of her betrayal had settled on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Chloe was waiting for her in the hallway, holding a bouquet of wildflowers she had clearly picked from one of her painting locations. I thought these might brighten your workshop, Chloe said, her face lighting up at the sight of Molly. Then, seeing Molly's expression, her smile faded. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Chloe, Molly began, then stopped. How? Could she explain what had happened without destroying everything they had built together? How could she make Chloe understand that the kiss had meant nothing while simultaneously admitting that she had allowed it to happen? What is it? Chloe asked, setting the flowers aside and taking Molly's hands. You're shaking. The kindness. In Chloe's voice, the genuine concern in her eyes, broke something inside Molly. The tears came then, hot and bitter and full of shame. I kissed someone else, she whispered. God, Chloe, I'm so sorry. I kissed someone else. Chloe's hands went still in hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. When Chloe finally spoke, her voice was quiet, careful. Tell me what happened, so Molly told her. Everything. The twins' persistent attention, their calculated questions, their systematic undermining of Molly's confidence in the relationship. She told Chloe about the doubts they had planted, the insecurities they had watered and fed until they grew into monsters. I don't know why I let it happen, Molly finished, her voice raw from crying. It meant nothing, less than nothing. But I still let it happen, and I can't take it back. Chloe was quiet for a long time, standing at the window and looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. When she finally turned back to face Molly, her expression was thoughtful rather than angry. "These twins," she said slowly, "they've been pursuing you. Systematically. Planting doubts, creating opportunities, manipulating situations." "Yes, but that doesn't excuse—" "No," Chloe agreed. "It doesn't excuse the kiss. But it explains. It—" She moved to sit beside Molly on the couch, careful to leave space between them. "Molly, you've been questioning everything about yourself since your divorce. Your identity, your desires, your future. You were vulnerable, and they took advantage of that vulnerability. You're being too kind," Molly said miserably. "I betrayed you. I betrayed us." "You made a mistake," Chloe corrected gently. "A mistake that hurt me, yes. But also a mistake that taught you something important about what you actually want." Molly looked up, surprised by the lack of condemnation in Chloe's voice. "What do? You mean, you said the kiss meant nothing. Less than nothing. That tells me that despite all their manipulation, despite all the doubts they planted, your heart knows where it belongs." Chloe reached out tentatively, touching Molly's cheek with infinite gentleness. "The question is, do you know where your heart belongs?" Before Molly could answer, before she could find the words to express the certainty that was growing in her chest like sunrise after the darkest night, her phone rang. The caller ID showed her building security number. "Miss Foster," the voice was urgent, professional. "There's been a fire in your workshop. The fire department is on the way, but you need to get here immediately." They drove through the night. Streets and Chloe's car, neither speaking, both understanding that whatever conversation they had been having would have to wait. By the time they arrived at Molly's building, fire trucks had already cordoned off the street, their red lights painting the darkness in urgent, desperate hues. Molly's workshop, her sanctuary, her livelihood, her carefully curated collection of preserved beauty was gone. 15 years of work, thousands of specimens, irreplaceable pieces she had created with love and patience and infinite care, all reduced to ash and smoke and the lingering smell of destruction. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the fire chief said, his voice gentle with practiced sympathy. The electrical system in that section of the building was old. Sometimes these things just happen, but Molly knew better. She saw the twins across the street, standing in the shadows beyond the police barriers, their expressions unreadable in the dancing light of the fire trucks. They watched her for a moment, then melted back into the darkness as silently as they had come. "They did this," she whispered to Chloe, who stood beside her with tears streaming down her face, tears not just for the loss of Molly's work, but for the pain she could see etched in every line of Molly's body. "We can't prove that," Chloe replied quietly. "And even if we could, it won't bring back what you've lost." In the weeks that followed, Molly discovered something she hadn't expected: liberation. The fire, devastating as it was, had burned away. More than just her workshop and specimens. It had burned away the last vestiges of her old life, her old identity, her old fears about who she was and what she wanted. Chloe never left her side during those dark days. She helped Molly file insurance claims, search for a new workspace, and slowly begin the process of rebuilding. More importantly, she held Molly when the grief became too much to bear alone, never asking for explanations or apologies, simply offering the steady presence of unconditional love. "I keep thinking about the butterflies," Molly said one evening, as they sat in Chloe's studio, surrounded by canvases painted with the kind of living beauty Molly had spent years preserving in death. "All those metamorphoses I documented, all those transformations from one form of life to another. I thought I was capturing endings, but maybe I was capturing beginnings." Chloe looked up from the illustration she was working on, a delicate watercolor of a caterpillar spinning itself into its cocoon. "Maybe," she said softly, "the fire was your cocoon, burning away everything that was keeping you trapped in your old form." It was then that Molly truly understood what the twins had unknowingly given her. In their attempt to destroy her relationship with Chloe, they had forced her to examine what that relationship actually meant to her. The kiss had been empty, hollow, meaningless because it lacked the one thing that made physical contact sacred: love. Real love, not the performance of love or the idea of love, but the deep, abiding recognition of another soul that resonated with your own. "I want to create something new," Molly said, the idea forming even as she spoke. "Not preserved specimens, but living art, dynamic pieces that show the full cycle of transformation." What did you have in mind? Chloe asked, setting down her brush and giving Molly her full attention. A collaboration, Molly said, her voice growing stronger with each word. Your illustrations showing the living stages, my knowledge of the transformation process combined into something that celebrates the continuity of life rather than just preserving its endpoint. Their joint exhibition opened 6 months later in a gallery that specialized in nature-inspired art. They called it Metamorphosis, a study in transformation, and it drew crowds from the first day. Chloe's paintings showed the living stages of various insects and plants, caterpillars feeding on leaves, pupae suspended in their silken chambers, butterflies emerging with wings still soft and crumpled from their confinement. Molly's contribution came in the form of interactive displays that allowed visitors to see the actual physical structures involved in these transformations, to understand the incredible complexity of the process that turned a crawling creature into something capable of flight. But the centerpiece of the exhibition was something entirely new, a series of mixed media installations that combined Chloe's living illustrations with Molly's preserved specimens to show the complete cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Visitors would begin with paintings of eggs and larvae, move through displays of the transformation process, and end with both living butterflies in a specially constructed habitat and preserved specimens showing the incredible detail of their wing patterns and body structures. It's like watching time itself, one visitor commented, standing before their piece about monarch migration. You can see the whole story from beginning to end and back to beginning again. The twins appeared at the opening reception, dressed in identical black dresses that made them look like ravens among the colorful crowd. They approached Molly and Chloe as they stood near the central installation, accepting congratulations from admirers. Molly, Hannah said, her voice sweet as poison honey, what a lovely exhibition. Though I have to say, I'm surprised to see you working with preserved materials again after everything that happened to your workshop. It was a threat wrapped in silk, a reminder that they had the power to destroy what Molly had built once more. But Molly looked at them now with eyes that had been cleared by fire and loss, and the hard-won knowledge of what truly mattered. Hannah, Haley, she nodded to each twin in turn. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoy the show. If you'll excuse me, I need to get back to my partner. She took Chloe's hand and turned away, not bothering to watch their reaction. Behind them, she heard Hannah's sharp intake of breath, the sound of predators realizing their prey had grown too strong to hunt. Later that evening, after the gallery had closed and the last of the visitors had drifted away into the night, Molly and Chloe walked through the empty exhibition space, their footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. Look what we built, Chloe said, stopping before the central installation. Look what we created together. It's more beautiful than I ever imagined. It could be, Molly replied. And she wasn't just talking about the art. She had been carrying the ring for weeks, waiting for the right moment. It wasn't a traditional diamond, but rather a unique piece she had commissioned from a local jeweler, a delicate band of white gold that held not a stone, but a tiny preserved butterfly wing encased in crystals so clear it seemed to float in midair. Chloe, she said, her voice steady for the first time in months, I have something to tell you. Chloe turned to face her, eyebrows raised in gentle curiosity. I love you, Molly continued, reaching into her pocket. Not because you were my soft landing after my divorce. Not because you were the first woman to show me kindness. I love you because when I'm with you, I feel like the person I was always meant to be. She dropped to one knee right there in the gallery, surrounded by their joint creation, their testament to the beauty of transformation. I love you because you saw the art in my science and the science in your art, and you helped me understand that the two were never separate at all. I love you because you held me while I grieved the person I used to be, and you celebrated with me when I discovered the person I was becoming. The ring caught the gallery lights as she held it up, the preserved wings seeming to flutter with life despite its stillness. Chloe Jones, she said, her voice carrying across the quiet space like a prayer, will you help me continue this transformation? Will you marry me? Chloe's answer was wordless, given in the form of tears and laughter and a kiss that tasted of promise and possibility. When they finally broke apart, she was wearing the ring, and Molly was wearing the most radiant smile of her life. It's perfect, Chloe whispered, holding up her hand to admire the way the preserved wing caught the light. It's absolutely perfect. It represents transformation, Molly explained. The butterfly gave up its ability to crawl in order to learn how to fly, just like I had to give up who I thought I was in order to discover who I really am. They married 6 months later in the botanical garden where they had first walked together, surrounded by the flowers Chloe loved to paint and the insects Molly had learned to see as individuals rather than specimens. The ceremony was small, intimate, attended only by the people who had supported them through their journey. As they exchanged vows beneath a trellis of climbing roses, Molly thought about the path that had brought her to this moment. The divorce that had felt like death, but had actually been birth. The twins who had tried to poison her garden but had instead taught her to recognize the difference between manipulation and love. The fire that had destroyed her old work but had cleared the ground for something even more beautiful to grow. "Do you take this woman," the officiant asked, "to be your partner in transformation, your companion in growth, your witness to the endless possibility of becoming?" "I do," Molly said, looking into Chloe's eyes and seeing their future reflected. "They're like light off water." "I absolutely do."